And a very good evening and welcome to this evening's edition of Politics 101. I'm David Hines, of course. And tonight's show, we are going to be featuring, or, well, featuring. We are going to be paying attention to the developments in the Orin Boston case. As you know, over the last couple of days, the Director of Public Prosecutions sent back the file to the police. I was about to say the PPP. The force of the police advising that the shooter of Mr. Boston, be charged for manslaughter. There was an immediate sense of approval on the part of the persons until it was digested and they realized that he was not charged for murder. Instead, he was charged for manslaughter. And a debate ensued all over social media, in the traditional media, about whether, in fact, a charge of manslaughter really was in order and a charge of murder. If you remember, Mr. Boston was shot while a team went in the early wee hours of the morning, and it was way back in September when this happened. And Mr. Boston, of course, killed, and the people, the Secriba in particular, the Dartmouth, where he's from, they came out the streets and to protest against this killing. All of Guyana, I would say all of Guyana, even persons who were pathetic to the government of the day, were disgusted, if you will, by kind of naked part of the force. Lots of the government got involved. The president, I understand, visited the area with the family. Eventually, our understanding was that the family advised the residents to cease the protests and that there were certain promises by the government. Most people thought that that would mean a swift charge against the alleged shooter. That was not to be. It took about 4 months before a charge was brought, and lots of lobbying and inquiry on the part of the lawyers, in particular Nigel Hughes, the lawyer for the family. And eventually, as I said last week, we had the charges being laid against the alleged shooter. Lots of debates since then. Should it be murder instead of manslaughter? What happens now that the police has charged the alleged for manslaughter and he's out on bail? You know, bail has become a big deal now because former Minister Winston Jordan was charged and he was placed on an enormous amount of bail, I think 3 million or something like that. Recently we had Mr. Sherrod Duncan, who was charged for calling somebody a nickname and was placed on $200,000 bail. So bail is a big issue now. And here is the young policeman being charged about he's out on bail. So lots of debate over that. Lots of debate, like I said, over whether it should be manslaughter or murder. We are hearing of private murder charges, of possible private murder charges. We're hearing about judicial review of the decision by the DPP, meaning I'm going to court, the higher court, to ask whether the decision to charge for manslaughter rather than murder is in order. So all of these things, we have that condemnation coming from all quarters. As usual, we are going to spend some time through this matter because we think it's a very, very important matter. The question of extrajudicial killing has been with us forever. In fact, as we speak, they are pending cases. We know the case of the brothers, the Henry brothers, were not killed by allegedly killed by the police. But that matter is still pending. Harry Singh, the other matter of Peter Headley, and other matters that the names that don't come to mind. But this is an issue that has been front and center of our debates in Guyana. So we want to talk tonight about the Orin Boston case. We are going to refresh our memories because, you know, we do refreshers here so that we are on top of what we are talking about. And we're going to talk about the issues that have arisen since this charge was initiated. So please share the link. Please do share the link because it's a very important program tonight. We are going to be talking none other than the person who should know about all that we want to talk about, and that is the law for the family. Nigel Hughes. Nigel is, of course, no stranger to us. Is one of the hardest working lawyers. Every time there is a political case, a human rights case, Nigel is there. Every society has that kind of lawyer, and we want to welcome Mr. Nigel. Welcome to Politics 101 again.
David, good evening and thank you. And I just want to, I don't think I've spoken to you for the year. I want to wish you the very best for 2022. Evidently, the year has not started as well as we'd hoped. But thank you, and allow me again to salute your efforts in bringing information to your significant audience.
And thank you very much, Nigel, and many happy returns, as we would say in Guyanese parlance. I have to be very careful because you can get charged now for using Guyanese idioms and things. Many happy returns to you. And also, I salute you on what you do, because we are all in this together. People sometimes think it's about opposing a particular party or opposing a particular government. I like to say that sometimes our activism needs to rise above the partisan divide and attack those very core principles that hold a society together, especially in the 21st century when the world has changed in a tremendous ways, and we in our part of the world, which are still in the relatively early days of trying to fashion a kind of society in which those of our people who have come out of autocracy can, as Professor Nettleford would say, can have the kind of society that is tenanted by people who are satisfied that they have gone further than their ancestors have gone in this journey for freedom. Ours is just about opposing governments and parties, but about building society our people can be comfortable in, and our ancestors can look down or look up from where they are and smile and say, well done, my sons and daughters. Nigel, I know those are sentiments you may want to comment on.
No, absolutely. You've captured it well. Our journey, short as it may be in the world, is really to start with. We start from the privileged position, David, of standing on the shoulders of those that have gone before us. We stand as beneficiaries to the sacrifices that were made before, and you know, in Guyana, I like to say that the sacrifices of our foreparents were paid in full a long time ago for our participation and right and entitlement to be part of this nation state called Guyana and to benefit equally with what this nation state has to offer, and also to ensure that insofar as there were injustices in the past, their labor went unpaid, insofar as reparations are concerned, all those are just entitlements. And since we have that privilege to be in this position, we owe a responsibility to pay it forward to the next generation to make sure that we leave, and whatever the legacy is that we leave it better than we found it, so that those who sacrificed before at least can smile and say, you tried and you have done well and you have delivered and you have allowed our offspring to be in a better position than the position in which we left you, and also that their goals and aspirations and our goals and aspirations find a firm platform to go forward. So I
Thank you
salute
very
you, and I completely agree with the sentiments that you've expressed.
Thank you very much, my brother. And on that note, I want to start. Yes, go right ahead.
I just wanted to say we lost a brother over the course of the last week, Mr. Ron Bob Semple, and like you, he has been toiling for a long time. Not just Marcus Garvey, but more particularly Guyana and the struggle. And I think, you know, I just want to pay my respects to Ron for all the work he did. As a matter of fact, maybe about a week and a half before he died, he actually interviewed that very great elder statesman of ours, AUC, and myself. And, you know, thanks, Ron, we salute you.
Thank you very much for reminding me of that, and I want to join with you. I was speaking to Brother UC just 2 nights ago, and he was reminding me of that interview that you did together, and making sure that I saw it, and I had to tell him, yes, I saw it. And I first met Bob Semple in 1987 in New York at the Pan-African Hotel, where for the first of this person, and I thought it was Marcus Garvey. He came out. My God, electrifying, and we've kept in touch since then. And a very serious cultural worker, extremely serious cultural worker. Often we see the politicians and the political activists in front, but those artists, those creative persons who bring to the fore our deeper feelings, deeper instinct, and our roots and the environment around us really sometimes play a more powerful than we, the political, because we feed off of them. We feed off of the cultural nourishment that they provide. And I want to join you in saluting that brother Semple. Continued. I had the privilege of interviewing him last year, I think May or June, on a Sunday evening on Marcus Garvey, and the audience was really happy by the Pan-African reality and Pan-African, and as we say, when our good people and all on to the beyond, the great war good, and it is not out of place. So, in a sense, dedicate tonight's program to the memory of Ron Bob Semple. If you've never seen a clip by him, you out there in the audience, please make sure they're all over YouTube, that you make sure you look at something. It is in that spirit that I want to start tonight's show, not as propaganda, but as I want to locate, we're going to talk about tonight, the context of human rights. Because I think that we have to start to understand what has happened to Boston, what has happened to so many young, underprivileged boys and increasingly girls in Guyana and for the field. Nigel, I want you to do that, to locate the Boston incident within the context of human rights and rights violation?
Sure. Thank you again, David. I think the most fundamental human right anybody can enjoy is the right to life. The right to life is your most fundamental right. Because if you do not enjoy that right, then all the other rights are not available to you. The right to be heard, the right to gather together, the right to free speech. You first have to be alive. And the right to life is the first right. Now, rights are not interpersonal things. I don't have a right to life against you, David Hines. The state guarantees all its citizens the right to life, other than when it takes it what they call legally by way of hanging, for example. Somebody gets sentenced for murder and then they get sentenced to death, then that's considered a legitimate, and even that is controversial. We're challenging that right now in the Court of Appeal. But the right to life is the most fundamental right. So the citizen Orin Boston, like any other citizen in Guyana, had the right to not have the state take his life from him, because that is the most fundamental right he had. He had the right for the state not to take that right, the right to live from him. And what that means is whether it's the police, whether it's the judiciary, whether it's a government executive, nobody who acted for and behalf of the state had the right to take Mr. Boston's life. Unless, of course, it was pursuant to some legitimate court order, which is not applicable here. Mr. Boston, citizen, and I dare say good citizen, not that a bad citizen the state has the right to take the life from a bad citizen. The state doesn't have the right to take the right from life from anyone. But Mr. Boston, good citizen, in the context that he had no prior police engagement, he had no prior police record, he was never the subject of any police investigation, he was never the subject of any narcotic investigation, he was not the subject of any sort of law enforcement investigation, was sleeping in presumably the most secure place that you can sleep, and the state guarantees you the right to sleep in your house. Mr. Boston wasn't on the road, he wasn't in a car, he wasn't in a hotel, he wasn't traveling on a boat, he wasn't traveling in an aircraft, he was in his most secure location, which is his home, and within that home, he was in his most private quarters, in his bed, in the most personal of circumstances, lying next to his wife. That is his right. While he is in his bed, at a time when the population by and large is asleep, 4:30 a.m., some people may just have risen. Not only does the state, through its agents, the Special Weapons and Tactical Unit, not only do they breach his home without a warrant and without him being on any list, not that his name being on a list allows them to breach his home, they enter his home, they find his very young daughter in the front room, couldn't be more than 7, 8 years old. They take her, remove her from the house, announce to her that they are going for her father, and seconds later, she hears a gunshot. Mr. Boston is lying in his bed, naked, next to his wife, and he is shot dead instantly. He urinates himself as he's shot dead. So in terms of the context of human rights, that man's right to life, his right to privacy, his right to be in his own home, the right to not have people, particularly the state, invade his home, all those rights were violated by the arm of the state known as the Guyana Police Force, every single right. And he is shot lying, not sitting in his bed, not standing in his bedroom. He is shot lying on a bed next to his wife. I just want to give people some context here. if you live in Prashad Nagar, or if you live in Pradaville 2, or if you live in any community, affluent or otherwise, and you are in your house with your wife in your bedroom, and the state enters your house without a warrant, removes your child or children so that there is no witness, so to speak, enters your bedroom and shoots you while you are lying on your bed next to your wife in a state of nakedness. I cannot imagine anything that is more gruesome and anything that is a greater breach of the most precious and fundamental right you have, which is the right to life. And I do not seek to inflame this, but this is a fact. When the Germans went for the Jews, they went into their homes. They didn't shoot them in their homes. They removed them from their homes, took them to holding places, put them in trains, and then carried them to a gas chamber. Not even the Germans went into people's homes and shot them in their beds while they were lying with their spouses. Not even the Germans during the worst of times in the last 2 centuries. So just to give everybody a context on this, your most precious right is the right to life. And that was taken away from Mr. Boston without a trial, without an accusation, without him even being a suspect, without a wanted bulletin, without anything that it even remotely have said, well, he should have gone to the station. The police never even left a message at his home to say, we would like to see you, sir. And you go into his house at 4:30 a.m. and shoot him dead. And then the officer that is responsible for that, I'm sure we will come to that, gets charged with manslaughter. But I'm sure we will discuss that.
And surely that picture that is painted there must force all of us, every Guyanese, whether we are in Guyana or outside of Guyana, force us to ask ourselves some very serious questions. Is this the kind of environment we want our children and our grandchildren to grow up in? We have found oil and we are poised to become a rich country. But what it is to be rich when the account that Mr. Hughes gave there just now can happen in our country just like that, just like that. We have to ask ourselves some deep questions as we salute our movement and our journey, as we talk about our role models and lack of role models. Is that the kind of model that we want for our society? Serious questions that we have to ask ourselves. Often society must stop and take note of what's happening around it, not just the politics, not just the everyday struggle, but those things that speak to the quality of our existence. And I'm afraid that sometimes in Guyana, we get so caught up in our politics, as we must, because all of this flows from politics. But sometimes we get so caught up in the partisan politics that we don't get down to the nitty-gritty, the quality of our humanity. The question always is what it is to be a human being, what it is to be human in an environment. We talk wildly and clearly about democracy and all these fancy terms, as we must. But do we stop
David,
to talk? Yes.
You can't have democracy unless you're alive.
There you go.
You can't vote. You can't get out your house to go and vote if the state is taking your life when you're lying in your bed. So democracy and all those concepts are secondary to being alive.
And that is the message we want to start with this evening. Nigel, when that murder in September erupted, and then the police promised that they would be swift on a movement on the case. I remember having you on this program and talking about the police investigating itself and
Absolutely.
the negative that follow from that. And one of the things that we were concerned about that there would not be a swift movement of the case. And we were proven correct. You were proven correct. Again, bring our audience up to speed on the journey from September to when the DPP sent the file back and said the alleged shooter should be killed. Walk us through those days and weeks.
So Mr. Boston got shot. And well, first of all, this SWAT teams, just so that we have the correct factual context for the SWAT team. SWAT, of course, is Special Weapons and Tactics Unit. This team was sent from Georgetown to Essequibo on a particular mission, which is to arrest certain murder suspects that they had received information were hiding in the Essequibo coast in some sandpit area. That was the mission. Special Weapons and Tactics, you're going to arrest murder suspects who they couldn't get. Mr. Boston was nowhere within that category, neither was he on the instructions list that was given to that SWAT team. The SWAT team arrested these gentlemen who they went for in Lima. Lima is about, 20 miles away from Dartmouth. For them to come back to Georgetown, and the other thing about SWAT teams, especially in Guyana, is SWAT teams work during the night, because what they essentially do is a snatch operation. They go in under the cover of night, they identify the location of the suspects or the targets, they arrest them, and they bring them back before the community can wake up, before the community knows what's going on. The element of surprise, of course, is key to that. So in this case, Mr. Boston is not in the list. The police from Essequibo never wanted Mr. Boston. Not one single one of them ever wanted Mr. Boston. They never sent a message and say, your name is calling, we want to speak with you. Nothing. So they go in. Somewhere along the line, a message had to have been given to the head of the SWAT team. And this is very important. The constable can't go by himself and say, oh, let's go by Orin Boston and check him out because we hear X, Y, and Z. The head of this unit either had to get an instruction from Georgetown or had to get information normally from the region, the commander for the region or somebody in the region, that they got a problem going on with Boston. We suspect he's somewhere, let's move. None of that happened. They got no request from anybody in Essequibo that said this man is wanted. So one of the first issues that we have is that this is not just the man that shot Mr. Boston. The person who took the decision to go to Mr. Boston's house must have had a reason to go there. We know they had no warrant. We know they had no request from the police in Essequibo to go there. So clearly this was some mission in which the leader of the squad either was party to or was carrying out the instructions of somebody else. So he goes to the house. David, if you enter, the police have standard operating procedures, and I'm very happy that former Assistant Commissioner, Mr. Conway, I think it was, has written extensively in the newspapers about what the standard operating procedures are for the use of deadly force in circumstances. You got to be under threat, the person got to be armed, or if they're not armed, the member of the public got to be under threat, and there's some standard circumstances under which the police force is allowed to use deadly force. Other interesting point. The weapons that you use depend on the circumstances. You don't go to arrest a child armed with an AR, which is the very modern, fully automatic weapon. And a matter of fact, it is clumsy to use at close quarters. An AR is something that you stand up and it's automatic and you shoot people at a distance. You don't shoot people 10, 15 feet away from you with an AR if you are a member of the law enforcement agencies. You go with smaller arms. Even a 9mm is significant, but you got a sidearm. You don't go trying to arrest somebody, which is the only basis they could have gone to the house, with an AR. That's something you use to take down people who are clearly a threat to life and the public. You know, they got a bank robbery going on, they're in the middle of some hostage situation that they're heavily armed. And yes, you don't go into a citizen's house with an AR. So The leader of that group decided that he was then going to Mr. Boston's home specifically. It wasn't as if he was combing the neighborhood looking for somebody fitting Mr. Boston's description and got a message that he lived in 2 houses in and went to the wrong house. They go specifically to Mr. Boston's house. The most chilling thing about this is if you arrive at a location and there are children around and you have the weaponry like an AR, an AK, fully automatic weapons with you and there are children around, there is no way you should be entering that location with that kind of weaponry, because the risk of harming somebody just by an accidental discharge is much higher with a high-powered weapon that is fully automatic. They see Mr. Boston's daughter. They take her out of her bedroom, first bedroom in the house. This is where how Mr. Boston lived. The house wasn't locked. This is Essequibo Coast, Dartmouth. So the sliding doors are just pulled in. This is not even a case where the house was locked. That is how secure that community is. They go to bed and they don't lock their room. So this squad opens the door, finds the daughter. The fact that the door is open would tell you that this is not a person that takes an awful lot of precaution about security. So even if you got some instruction, no person who is notorious for violence will leave their sliding door open. The first bedroom is their daughter's bedroom. They're till down in the last bedroom. That is not the conduct of, oh, we just got blackout. I'm so sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes, we are hearing you. Continue.
The generator should have kicked in. All right, let me see what I can do here. This is Georgetown. Maybe they decided that they wanted to convert it. Can you give me 5 minutes? Let me just get the security to put the generator back on. And I'll be back on. Yeah, just give me 5 minutes to do that. Thank you.
And of course, there, the daily life in Guyana in 2021, blackout in the middle of an evening when people should be home, the children should be doing homework. Now it's 7 o'clock in Guyana. People should be doing homework. Parents are now coming home from work, trying to prepare dinner. Blackout. Blackout. And this is the kind of democracy that we are talking about. You see, the point I'm making here is that sometimes we have to get to the human side of things. Because when you take something like blackout, it has nothing to do with which party you belong to. It has to do with the quality of life in a modern society. We have gone from when I was a child, when you didn't have electricity, to the point when you got electricity, to the point when blackout became a staple 30, 40 years ago, and it still is. What kind of society are we building? These are questions I want us to ask ourselves. What kind of society are we building as we fight each other, as parties fight one another for power, as governments sit up there and lord it over the people? What kind of society are we building? What kind of society? What is the quality of life? A child, children, growing up in an environment where blackout is constant. They turn on the TV and they watch Lands Afar and they don't see blackout. What is it they're going to think about their own country? These are really serious questions I want us to ponder. As I listen to the account, as we listen to the account from the lawyer there of what occurred in that man's home on that night, I want us to think very seriously. Is this the Guyana that we want? Is this the Guyana that we want? And then the government takes months to deliberate on what is clearly planned murder. want to say good night, good evening to all of you, wherever you are, coming down and staying with us in Politics 101. Uncle Francis Kwame Ofaria, one of our treasures, living treasures, is on tonight. Thanks, Francis. Thanks for the New Year's wishes to myself and Nigel and Kathy. Thanks, and many returns to you. Happy New Year! And I'm telling you, Brother Francis, we know that this is Politics 101, but my politics is no politics without culture. We're gonna have you come on one of these evenings in the not too distant future to talk about your journey, because it's been a long journey. I was a little boy decades ago, hovering around that radio and listening to the Tides of Susan Berg. And I remember that well, and hearing the name Francis Kwame Ofaria. And when I eventually met you years later in Washington, D.C., where you were visiting your family at the time, it was like being in the presence of royalty. Such a humble person, walking around Georgetown like a normal person, but walking around with tremendous history and so on. Francis Kwame Ofaria, who like Ron Bob Semple and others have really toiled in the vineyard, in the valley, really unearthing our cultural moorings and our cultural being. You see, the cultural being is very important. In politics, sometimes we speak to the surface. We don't speak deep down. And you see, culture is what is important. You know, one of my favorite persons, I've used that name so many times here that you all would get accustomed, Professor Rex Netherford from Jamaica, he said, when a people are oppressed, they go deep into a place where the oppressor cannot see. And it is out of that place that comes what we call art and dance, and poetry and prose, and music, and all of those things that we in Guyana and the Caribbean have produced in abundance. Small, poor nations, post-plantation societies. But we've produced more artists than we are supposed to produce. Why? It is because out of that condition of oppression, we've learned to create new languages, new music, new instruments. Is there any surprise that the newest music of the 20th century and the 21st century, reggae, the newest musical instrument, steel pan, coming from our Caribbean islands, a small but complex society, complex people, and people like Francis who take those energies from our people, translate them into art, and then give them back to us as cultural nourishment. That is why we always celebrate art and culture, that every little boy and little girl at the corner of the street in Guyana, wherever they are, they can sing, they can dance, even before they learn to read and write. We have rhythm in our soul, as they say. And that rhythm, whether it's the way we speak, whether we say jagabat or trench crapo, producing colorful language to describe reality, making the distinction between different qualities. Some are trench crapo, some are land crapo. That's what the trench crapo story is about. It's about artistic people creating imagery to say that there are different levels of human behavior. some are trench crapple, some are land crapple, and they may say yard crapple. Some crapple does their own latrine. And today in 2021, you can be charged for creative expression. Jagabat is a Trinidadian term to mean a loose woman, and today you can say a loose man. That's all it is. That's all it is. And you have the equivalent of Jagabat, the Banskidimites and Badman and Postman and Baduman. They come from the same origin. You see, our people are creative, and the creativity of our people can now pull you before the courts. And those who do that ashamed of themselves, what kind of human beings are they? What kind of human beings have we elected to govern us? They don't have a sense of culture. They don't have a sense of creativity. They're turning what is wonderful about us and criminalizing it. I'm saying, people ask me all the time, why? Why do you bother with this politics thing? It's not just about politics. We're not into politics just for the sake of politics. We're into politics so that we can save the soul of our society. Because without the soul, we don't go anywhere. You know, Black Americans and Black people, we have soul music, the soul. We have soul food. We walk with soul. It is a soul deep inside. And the soul goes, the society goes. So what we are fighting for is not just politics. We are fighting for the soul of our society. That when our artists stand before their microphones or sit behind their computers and they write their prose and their poetry and their drama, they are trying to concoct our souls and to put that before us as entertainment, put that before us as cultural tools. Then comes the politician who destroys the cultural tool. There's no shame. There is no shame that lurks in the minds of these people. And so, as we discuss Mr. Boston tonight, and I see Mr. Hughes is back, and I think everything should be all right now. Nigel, you were telling us about giving us the circumstances under which the shooting took place, and to make the point as you were making, that Mr. Boston was not a wanted man, and that there must have been some kind of premeditation on the part of those who entered there. Over back to you.
Right. So thank you. I apologize to you, David, and the members of the audience. Blackout came, and unfortunately, in the night we shut down the automatic transfer. So I had to go get it manually done here in Generator. Yeah, I was saying that when you enter a location that has children, the procedures changed immediately to a greater concentration on safety rather than if you're going to arrest someone. So that's quite often why you find, especially in high terrorist situations or in the battles that they have in the Middle East, that a lot of these gunmen and terrorists plant themselves in the middle of what appears to be a normal community because, of course, the potential for collateral damage is so much greater. So the SWAT team, under whatever instructions they got, after they got the original instructions to go to Essequibo, entered the house. Like I said, the sliding door was not closed. This is a residential community right near the waterfront. slide the door open. 3 heavily armed persons remove Mr. Boston's daughter. They go to the door to his bedroom. Clearly, again, another indicator that this is a very peaceful community. His door is not locked. It's not locked with a lock. It's not locked with anything. So they literally push the door open. They don't knock or say, Boston, come out. We are outside. Raise your hands. Come out peacefully. They storm into the room. 3 men. And so they had to have had their fingers on the trigger. But guns don't go off by themselves. Guns go off because you have your finger on the trigger. And somebody pressed that trigger of the AR, who we now know as Mr. Peters, and shot Mr. Boston while he was lying in his bed next to his wife, sleeping. Now, just to walk through this in slow-mo, you kick open the door. So you have the advantage of the element of surprise. Imagine if you're sleeping, or even if you're awake, and somebody kicks open your door who you do not expect. They have the element of surprise over you. So by the time you could even react, they got you covered. So they kick this door open. 3 of them enter, guns pointing at him, fingers on the trigger. Mr. Boston was lying on a mattress on the ground next to his wife. So they would have seen him lying next to his wife. They don't say a single word. Bang! Shot next to his wife. Naturally, as a biological function, you either urinate or defecate yourself. In this case, he urinates. His wife, of course, is in absolute shock. She feels the warm substance coming on her leg. She doesn't know what's going on because it's not as if she's the girlfriend of a gunman who is expecting this at any time. This is the wife of a person who has never had any interaction with the police period. So this is not even a remotely familiar scenario for her. She figures, in her own words, that they're going to shoot her next because these men are all masked. They're all in dark clothing, and they never mention that they're police or Kanu or whoever. They never mention. So she assumes that she getting shot next, which is not an unreasonable assumption to make, even if it is the police, and says, I could go, because all she wants to do at that stage is get out and save her life. She gets up, they said, yeah, comes out of the bedroom through the single door, goes outside. They then move Mr. Boston, who is shot and bleeding, out of the bedroom, through his house, and rest him on the concrete outside. Don't forget, his little 7 or 8-year-old daughter was put out the house, so they go arrest him exactly where they put her out the house. Next door, maybe about 15, 20 feet in the same compound, same yard, is his parents' home. They arrest him there, and then they go back inside, search the premises, and somebody at some stage then puts him into the back of a pickup, drives him to the Surrey hospital, where he is pronounced dead on arrival. That is exactly what happened. So, of course, this is completely unwarranted. The people of Dartmouth, notoriously peaceful. As a matter of fact, we could take notice of the fact that the Essequibo coast, in all the dark hours and dark weeks and dark months and dark years of Guyana's most troubled past, has never, ever had protests that erupt simultaneously, spontaneously, or that are planned. They happen in Demerara, they happen in Berbice. Essequibo coast, never. Essequibo, south by Rupununi, had an uprising in '69, not Essequibo coast. These people live together. The races mix well. Of course, they've got political differences, they vote differently, but they have never in any of those communities ever had any sense of disruption or protest before the morning is out. The people are so enraged because it's a close community. People hear what happened, that they protest. They protest, which you would expect to do. David, imagine, God forbid, you're living next door to somebody, they're going to shoot the man. Man doesn't have any violent past, anything known about him. They protest. The police clearly have shot him. There's no question about this. This is not a third-party shooting. And from the time this became public knowledge, everybody said, can we please have an independent investigation? Because we cannot possibly have the Guyana Police Force investigate themselves where this killing is as heinous as it has been. Everybody said so. We got contacted by the family, and our first release, we said, we want an independent inquiry. Bring them from wherever, whichever police force in the region, whichever special investigation team you want, whether the Federal Bureau of Investigation, whoever you want, bring them. But we for sure do not trust the police to conduct their own investigation. And I will just share what tends to happen in these investigations. Where police have clearly shot somebody and they're trying to cover themselves, all kinds of things happen. The ballistics disappear, the ballistics get switched, people don't give a statement. And the very first reaction of the Guyana Police Force when this man got shot, the first press release said Mr. Boston attacked the police officers and got shot in the course of that attack. So think about this. This man gets shot at 4:45 in the morning, 4:43 or thereabouts in the morning. And by 8 o'clock, the police apparatus are saying to the public, this man confronted the police and got shot in a confrontation. Just think about that. This is the official police report. This is not some constable or somebody who is in the SWAT team trying to justify what they did. This has to go up the chain of the Guyana Police Force to the top. It has to get sanctioned before it is released. And that means they were prepared at 7:45 in the morning or whenever they issue that release to give a completely different version of events to what actually happened. Now that is a scary place to be, because if they by their own actions demonstrated that they were prepared at that early stage to reveal a pattern of events that was completely different to what happened. You never heard it after the wife came out and said the man was shot in the bed. You didn't hear anything else about them repeating that story.
Right.
But so it means that the apparatus of the people who are supposed to protect and serve us and supposed to bring credible evidence of what actually happens to a court or in a statement were prepared to distort, contort, and completely convert, I can't even say convert the facts. They created a situation that never happened. Mr. Boston could never have gotten out of the bed to attack anybody, but they were prepared to say to the public, that is what happened. Now, like I said, that had to go up the chain and come out, because the police know that this was a difficult situation. The people were already protesting. And then the wife was interviewed by some member of the press early in the morning. She said, oh, no way, absolutely. I was lying in the bed next to this man. This is not me coming from the kitchen into the bedroom so you could say I didn't see what happened. I was lying next to this man when he got shot. I could tell you I felt the urine after he got shot. So the police force by 8 or whatever time in the morning says that. So that is the first danger sign and the first indication about why you want an independent investigation, because the police at the first option, available opportunity created by themselves said, look, this man attacked and that's why we fired. And then when the wife came out, we realized that that was not so. They completely backtracked from that. So how is an institution which the first thing they do is give you a completely distorted, created scenario going to then investigate itself with a view to arriving at an accurate record of what happened that morning in the bedroom. How is it possible, David? I come into your house, slap you in your face, humiliate you in front of your wife, and then, because I'm the police officer, I'm going to investigate the same incident. That is exactly what happened there. And because of the history of the Guyana Police Force and the lack of trust that exists between the public and the Guyana Police Force, particularly insofar as their ability to accurately recount what happens, because of that, everybody said, get an independent investigator. Never happened. Even the police knew that this thing was odious and that it was bad. That's why they sent it to the Office of Professional Responsibility, because they knew they couldn't ask their own special squad up at CID or anybody else, because they know from themselves what their conduct is going to be. So they sent it to the OPR, which is a sector of the Guyana Police Force that has to report to the commissioner, the same commissioner who would have authorized the release of that press release. So how is he now, if that's your boss, and your boss has already said the story went this way, i.e. you attacked the police, how are the people under him going to find the courage to find anything different that will embarrass the police? Because if your boss man said that it went this way and the man attacked, how are you now going to conduct an investigation and say something different and keep your job and your career? So what then happens is we hear the OPR is going to conduct the investigation. Officers from the OPR go, they interview Mrs. Fiona Boston. She gives them exactly the same story as she did from the first time she was arrested. They examine the location, and this is interesting. We got there, well, it must have been, I think, the next day, or maybe 2 days down. The mattress, which would have been an important piece of evidence that should have been taken into police custody, because in that mattress has the urine of Mr. Boston when he died. It is proof that somebody urinated on that mattress. Should have gone into police custody as important evidence. Was still there when we went there. We saw it, the family brought it out and gave it to us. A bloody pillow was still there when we went there, David. So no attempt was made at any stage to conduct a thorough police investigation. And if we got there a day, maybe 2 days after he was shot, and that evidence was still there, clearly chain of command, contamination, everything had happened. We wrote to them about it, but I mean, any defense lawyer is going to tear that apart. Yeah, you switch the mattresses or what have you. Already compromised scene that would have provided additional evidence to confirm that Mr. Boston was in a lying position when he was shot. All of this they don't collect. And then they go and they visit. The police in Essequibo confirmed that he was not wanted. He was a good citizen. OPR goes up. There are some good officers in OPR. I will acknowledge that. They interview several people, and we were actually present virtually during some of those interviews and physically present during some of the others. An investigation like this, just to give you the context, David, if somebody breaks into your house and you're not sure who they are and it's masked and they don't leave fingerprints, you could say, well, you need time to gather the forensics. Okay? And you can gather that pretty quickly, because scene of the crime goes in, they pick up the fingerprints, they don't pick up the fingerprints, they pick up the shell. This is an open and shut case. We know it's police. The police know who were the policemen that went there. The policemen know who were the 3 men that went there. Of those 3 men, 2 of the men know who shot. Matter of fact, all 3 of them know who shot. So they have to go back to the station and file statements about what happened long before they do anything else, even without the killing. They got to say, this is what happened. So this is not a case where it's not a whodunit case. You're not looking for who the police officer is. You know who he is. And you have 2 policemen to confirm who it is. So why would this investigation take anything longer than a week? Because all the evidence is there. Dead body, bullet, rungs, shells, mattress, bloody pillowcase, bloody sheet, wife statement, everything you have. They don't take a week. They don't take 2 weeks. They take, I think it was a month and a half or 2 months. And then they send the file to the police complaints authority for them to investigate. The police complaints authority, the chairman of the police complaints authority, his contract of service had expired and he had not been renewed. So they knew by sending it there that nothing much is going to happen, because we're not sure that the police complaints authority, the chairman, actually has the lawful authority to conduct this investigation. So they send it there. I don't know if he eventually got it or what happened. And then the chairman says, I don't wish to rely on what the police investigation showed. I'm going to conduct my own investigation. And he conducts an investigation, which means they have to go back and re-interview all those witnesses. Imagine if you were Mrs. Boston. It's traumatic to give a statement to the police the first time, especially where your husband died, was shot like an animal next to you. Imagine having to relive that on 2 and 3 occasions just because they want another statement for the investigation. We wrote to the Guyana Police Force. We wrote to the chairman of the Police Complaints Authority. We wrote to the Director of Public Prosecutions saying we took our own statements, which we did. As soon as we went up, we took statements. We have them, and that the evidence that is disclosed here is murder. And just briefly for the benefit of your listeners, the difference between murder and manslaughter is the unintentional killing of a person. Unintentional. So tell me, if I go into your house with an AR, finger on the trigger, how could I unintentionally shoot and kill you? That's one of manslaughter charges. How could I unintentionally shoot you lying in your bed when my finger is on the trigger of one of the most powerful weapons around today? In addition to that, you go off mission to a man who you had no authority to go for. He wasn't wanted any of this. And you break into his house, remove his daughter, kick down the door to his room, and you shoot him with an AR, completely in breach of every single standard operating procedure of the Guyana Police Force. How is that going to be unintentional? You didn't unintentionally go to the house. You weren't unintentionally armed. Your finger was not unintentionally on the trigger of an AR. But even if you want to say that the killing was unintentional, the only body that can say this is the jury, not the Director of Public Prosecutions. The Director of Public Prosecutions cannot come to a finding on fact in these circumstances to say that killing was unintentional. She doesn't have the basis, because she has before her, I don't care whatever else she has before her, she has before her the wife's statement that says these men came in and fired at my husband. She has ballistics that identify that it was an AR, and she has the fact that this was an unauthorized entry into a house where they had no authority and this man was not on their list. So how does she get the privilege to come to a finding that this was unintentional? That is for the jury. That is for Mr. Peters' lawyer to go and argue before the jury. That's why we have a jury system. That's why we give it to the magistrates at the preliminary inquiry stage to say, look at this evidence and what does it disclose? And even if the evidence disclosed that this man said, I heard that story floating around, that he panicked and he fired, that's for the jury to decide. That's not for you to decide. That is for the jury to decide if you panic. The DPP doesn't get the privilege of deciding whether you panic or not, or to assume that because he said he panicked, you disregard the evidence to the contrary from the eyewitness lying next to that man. That is a matter for the jury. She doesn't get to play God. And that is why a manslaughter charge is not appropriate, completely inappropriate. Because this is not any, you don't unintentionally shoot somebody with an AR and you break into his house. How? And if that is the case, you go explain that to the jury. And
yes.
so this is the reason they would have charged him with manslaughter, is because they want him to get bail. They want him to get bail. No. We said to them that we would bring private criminal charges. But the reason we couldn't do that is because we did not have the identity of the police officers. These men went in with masks in the night, and the only witness would have been the wife. The wife clearly cannot identify somebody with a mask on their face. So we wrote the police saying, can you please, and this is repeatedly at the end of their investigation, during their investigation, provide us with the name of the man that discharged the weapon. It's not a case where you had multiple weapons being discharged. One weapon was discharged, one man discharged. They didn't even give us the courtesy of a reply. They didn't give the family the courtesy of a response. And so we couldn't bring those charges. They've now identified who the person that did the shooting is. And we have said, we can either bring private criminal, or we can go to have the decision of the Director of Public Prosecutions reviewed with a view to bringing murder, get a mandamus order. The reason we don't want to bring private criminal is this. Outside of the wife, all the other witnesses who are going to have to come to testify, including the two men in the room, are policemen. You know what's going to happen there. If we prosecute, they will either not turn up or their story will change. And the state has an obligation to every citizen, let us not lose track of that, to fearlessly prosecute those persons who have infringed the law, and you let the jury decide.
Nigel,
that's the responsibility of the state.
Yes, yes, Nigel, and thanks so much for walking us through that that old story there. And I'm judging from the comments here from our audience that they are taking all of this in and they're filling in the blanks wherever they were in their minds about what happened. Some of those people who are in favor of manslaughter over murder, or are skeptical about the murder charge, are saying, with a murder charge, it's the bar is higher. The proof, the burden of proof would be more for the defense.
Of course.
And so,
absolutely.
Is it better to go with the safer manslaughter? Speak to that.
Of course, it's a higher burden, because with murder, you have to prove intention to kill. But even if you charge with murder and you fail to prove the intention to kill, you still have a manslaughter conviction as an option. You could say, well, okay, he didn't intend to kill, he was reckless, or this was an unintentional killing, so you don't find him guilty of murder. You come back and you say that he was guilty of manslaughter. But the DPP can't make that decision. The DPP is not the jury. She cannot make that decision. It's like you have in the US, murder 1 and murder 2. Now, the only way she can come to a conclusion that this was an unintentional killing is that he fired because what? Because remember, there's standard operating procedures. And every police officer who you put in a SWAT team has to know those procedures, because it's not as if they give you a gun and say, hey, go out and arrest people or what have you. They got to be procedures. And so if I want David Hines and he's walking on the street, I don't pull up with ARs and put him on the pavement in Ghana, that is, and arrest him, because, unless there's some threat. So there's no history of any sense of violence. If you want, if for example, and I want to make this very clear, there's no reason to kill wanted people at all. Right. If you can take wanted people alive, that is what you have to do. So if you're going for fine man, I don't expect you to go with two 9mm and something else. But you're going for a man who has no history at all with the police. And when you go to his house, you find a child, you find the house in lock. So you're clearly, this is not a man who is in a dungeon behind several cage doors waiting for you with explosives and remote control and fully automatic weapons. A man like that is dead with his wife. And so I hear that, but that's why we have a jury. And if you persuade the jury that this was an accidental killing, that's the jury, not for the DPP to do that.
So you're not going to pursue the private criminal charges. What about the
No,
review?
we are going to review. We are pursuing by administrative law an order for mandamus to quash her decision to charge for manslaughter, and an order for mandamus to compel her to file a charge of murder.
To compel her to
Would you
file a
believe
charge?
up to this day they have not even had the courtesy of contacting the family to say what their investigation discharged, what the police are saying about the investigation? They didn't even have the decency to tell them which court this defendant was going to, so that at least they would have some sense of semi-closure by attending the court.
Yes. Now, I know your hands are full. You have all these cases, these human rights cases, the political cases. But let me ask you this. Are you and others who are part of these teams of lawyers, are you all in touch with like international agencies and so forth, alerting them about these developments in Guyana?
Well, I can speak for my team. My team is not myself alone. I do want to salute the members of my team. When we get hired or called, it's invariably by the family who wants us to assist. In this case, we got called in to advise them, which we are doing. We have provided them advice. But the short answer to your question about the elevation of these repeated incidents at a higher level internationally, we have not started to do that because a lot of that requires the collection of data, and then you look for the patterns that exist. Of course, we get retained by individual families, and we see a bit of a pattern, but then I'd have to set aside, or we'd have to put aside a team to do that. And a lot of that work, I dare say, is political work, not strictly speaking defense attorney work. And so we get hired as defense attorneys, not anything else. So those that have the voice to advocate internationally, like yourself, that aspect of it would be treated with by the persons that have that capacity and facility.
Thank you very much for that answer. And that is why I like to keep programs like these very serious and above board, very informational. Because what you can do, you there in the audience who live in Barbados and live in the United States and England, you can take a program like this and forward it to human rights groups in the countries where you belong and where you live. Please do that. And because the more we internationalize these things, the more the world gets to know Guyana as not just a place where they can come and take our oil riches and take it away, but as a very complex place, and that they're dealing with a government that is not taking enough care about human rights. At a certain level, this is about African Guyanese men. Yes, it is about a part of a constituency that is friendly to the opposition. But above and beyond that, it's about the human rights of citizens. Today is Mr. Boston in Dartmouth. Tomorrow it's about Mr. Prasad in Port Morant, because these things do not go away. And we have to find a way to rise above our racial differences, to preserve human rights in our country. Welcome Nicole Cole, is an advocate for children, and she's in the audience. Welcome, Nicole, and I see some of the other activists on tonight. Take a show like this and forward it to places that will be interested in human rights in this country.
David?
Yeah.
Sorry to cut you, but could I also just perhaps make an additional suggestion?
Yeah.
One of our weaknesses in Guyana has been that we spend a lot of time in rhetoric, calling each other names and what have you. And what we really need is data. So what we need, apart from sending just a program like this, we need people to come and bring information together that can be verified, then we get that collated so that we say in the last 3 years, so many people have died as a result of police action. In the last 3 years, of those persons who died, so many persons have been charged, so many have been left without anybody getting charged, so many are incomplete. Of those in which the police have been responsible for the deaths or involved in the deaths, what sort of charges have been filed, how long it takes to investigate it, whether they have been charged, what the forensics are. And then you get a very clear pattern that you can then present to the international body. Because if you just send one document or one program, they will then ask you to do exactly what I just indicated, which is gather the data. And we have more than enough evidence of the excesses of the Guyana police force for decades. It is a culture. It is not something that started yesterday. It didn't start 5 years ago, and it didn't start 10 years ago. This culture of impunity and the culture where the police feel that it is absolutely necessary to protect their own clearly indicates that we can never leave it to them to investigate themselves. It is not acceptable. And therefore, we need to start talking about what institutions have to be established that are capable, enforced by law, and empowered by law, to investigate the police that are outside of the police, completely outside. For example, the chairman of the Police Complaints Authority has 0 investigators, or maybe 2. He has no power to command documents. He has no power to go to the commissioner of police and take documents. If they are in the process of shredding evidence, he has no power to go and take it. He has to ask them to do their own work. And so, especially as we're talking about becoming a sophisticated, wealthy society, we can't do this if we have Mickey Mouse systems in place, if we have institutions that look like the Flintstones. Because you can't, you know what would have been very interesting, God forbid, if this had been a foreign national, particularly an American national, you know where they would have been taking 3 months to investigate. I always use this as an example. We had the crime wave for 3-4 years. The second one of the gunmen got out his thoughts and kidnapped the American head of security, the whole crime wave came to an end instantly. It didn't take a week. All of a sudden, they found all the people, Sean Brown, blah, 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 blah. The second, so whoever led them to that position where they were crazy enough to kidnap an American, it came to an end instantly. And one thing you will say about America is that even the most dangerous terrorists will think 100 times before they decide they're going to harm an American. So what is it about us? If we know that they could have concluded this investigation in less than a week, where all the witnesses are there, all the information is there, that would cause them to be able to treat us with the disrespect and charge somebody 4 months after with manslaughter. It wasn't happening if it was something else. And so we pretend to be a country, but we're not.
Yeah, quite an indictment, but it's really true. Nigel, before we go, what's happening with the Henry/Harry Singh case?
Well, there are a series of cases. One of them, of course, is the murder of the 2 Henry boys, Joel and Isaiah, where two men have been charged. That preliminary inquiry is still going on. You know that the magistrate had discharged one of them and he got rearrested on the advice of the Director of Public Prosecutions. We have one where Mark Henry himself, brother to one of the deceased, is charged with the murder of I can't remember the name of the defendant, who they suspected was involved in the killing of Henry. That preliminary inquiry is going on. And then we have the 4 young men who are charged with the murder of Harris Singh, all of who have airtight alibis. That one is also going on. So all those cases are going on before Magistrate Peter Hugh at the Blairmont Magistrates Court. Now, the real one that caused all this uproar, which is the murder of the 2 Henry boys, As you know, we do not believe that the persons who were responsible for their death are before the court. The difficulty, of course, is going to be that when these gentlemen get discharged, as I'm sure they will, the police will say, well, yeah, we investigated, we charged these people, and we're not prepared to further investigate. And this is despite the several offers of forensic assistance that they got from the premier forensic body available globally.
Yes. And so there we have it. We are here with this development in the Boston case. We know that yesterday there were demonstrations on the coast, and I know this is not but we understand that a family was approached by the government in the early days of the shooting. What can you tell us about that? Have they been in touch, the government? Have they been in touch with the family?
From as far as I'm aware, from the family, there has been no further contact. Of course, naturally, what happens when the issue is hot and people are protesting, politicians, they attend and what have you. They would have done it. There has been no offer of, as far as I'm aware, any form of compensation for the death of this person. So it means his family is just left on their own. And as far as I know, nothing has happened. I know I saw Commander Griffith out there yesterday afternoon trying to persuade and placate the people who were protesting. And I know that the TSU went there at 3 or 4 a.m. today and they cleared the street. But as far as I'm aware, there has been no communication between the government. I really don't expect much. If the police don't even keep the family updated, I think it's indicative of the culture in which we live.
Which we live. And before we go for the second time, Nigel, let me ask you as a lawyer about this right to protest, because it's the right to protest, as it's protected by the Constitution and so forth. Because we've seen in Guyana and other countries like Guyana how that right to protest has been criminalized over the years. Put it in perspective for us, this right to
protest. I can't put in any better perspective than you did. You have the right to protest. You have the right to go down the road. It doesn't mean that you have the right to threaten anybody if you're protesting or threaten property or anything like that. We certainly have the right to protest. You have the right to stand up with a placard, provided it's not offensive in the sense of criminally offensive, not politically offensive. So I know that you probably don't want me to say trench crapo, but trench crapo is not offensive. So
I was coming to that.
So if you want to stand up with a shirt that says "I was born a trench crapo and I will die a frog," you can do that. You have the right to protest. You certainly do.
Is calling somebody a trench crapo is it a violation of the Cybercrime Act?
If I say to you in the street, we have an abuse out, and I say directly to you, David Hines, you are a trench crapo, you can't charge me with anything. You cannot charge me with anything. Nothing at all. I could cuss you out. I'm entitled to cuss you out. If I go and say to your partner, David is an old thief, you could sue me for libel. You could certainly sue me for libel, because it's not what I said to you. I could say to you, you're an old thief. But if I'm going to say that about you to a partner, that's libel. So no, if I could say to you in your face, I think you're an old thief, and I go and type in a program, I say in a program, you're old thief. Libel, yes. Where's the criminal offense? You see, this act had problems from the time it came in. It came in under the previous administration, and people warned and repeatedly said that you are creating a monster here because you are giving the state the power to persecute people where there's no basis for it. And people felt, well, Some people might have felt, oh, because it's the government I vote for, I'm going to go easy on it. At the end of the day, the state is like the police. People like to say they got police friend. Police are police. The state is the state. And I don't care which person is in office in the state. You do not give the state this level of power to intimidate the citizens at all and try and hide behind some sort of, oh, it wasn't intended. It has nothing to do with intention. If I give you a gun for good purposes, I don't control whether you go and take the gun and use it for some other purpose. And it's not a defense to say, oh, well, he didn't use it for the right purpose. That is infantile thinking. I mean, you create this monster, and now all the citizens have to live with it.
There you have it. Frank talk. But you now know that if you call someone, you type it in your computer, you go on a program, you say you're a jagabat and a transcrapper, maybe defamation, not a criminal offense. But by the same token, we have a cybercrime law that leaves the door wide open for anything to fall in. Nigel Hughes.
The last point. The last point I want to make about this is this. In a state where murders are taking place, COVID taking place, the state is really going to spend the energy prosecuting somebody for saying trench crapple? Really? There's the priority to get in the police force? People getting shot, killed, all kinds of stuff going on in the day. Rape, raping whoever, sexual offenses all over the place, domestic violence. You have time to sit down and listen to what somebody else calls somebody else on the internet and make that a priority criminal investigation. No, we're in an interesting place.
In a very, very interesting place, my brother. Nigel Hughes, thank you very much for another important session, laced with analysis and context and really an explanation of the law. Closing thoughts.
David, my closing thoughts are that I hope that Fiona Boston and the Boston family and the people in the community of Dartmouth get closure, that Mr. Peters answers to a jury for the offense of murder, and that nobody makes any decision before that. Let the jury decide what happened.
And thank you very much, Mr. Nigel Hughes. And I know that we're going to be calling upon you as this case continues. We're looking out for the judicial review, taking to the higher court the decision of the DP file a manslaughter charge instead of a murder charge. We shall be following that, and we shall be following all the developments as they are with this case, and you to that. Thanks again, my brother, and thanks for coming through again.
Actually,
you find the time, and we are thankful that you were able to spend an hour and a half with us going through this. Thank you.
My privilege. Have a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you. And there we go, another edition of Politics 101. I see my friend Kerry Robe is on. I was able to spend some time with that family on the East Bank. And out there in Providence is listening. But I spent a lot of time on the East Bank, met some wonderful people, and some people who are really regulars of the show. You know, we don't know how many people tune in shows because you're in your hundreds, and sometimes we see some names and we don't see others. But I want to big up all those people who I met walking in Guyana, the various villages that I was able to visit. It's Christmas time, you couldn't do much politics, but I was still able to move around and meet people. And for us, we spend a social, there is nothing that can substitute meeting people in their homes, in their villages, and connecting them. And that's what I always like. And like I said, I want to thank all those people that I met who came up to me. Of course, Christmas time, the raging subject was election of Aubrey North. For stopping me right in the center, me, well, what do I think? Whether it was the right development. To thank all of you who continue to come on to the show, keep our company and us an audience. And for those of you who continue to believe that those of us who have been thrown out of the formal media still have something to offer. Come on to this program. Jagabats or trends know who they are. We know who the loose ones in the society are. Those are the ones who are prosecuting and persecuting. But we ain't gonna, we're gonna keep on keeping on. Good night. And I'll see you tomorrow night. We're gonna get a report on what's happening on the Essequibo coast from Sherwin Holder, the chairman of the PNC, but on Essequibian. And we're gonna have a general discussion. Perhaps we haven't done so for a long time. Good night. Be coming in peace. Good night to Sherrod, and if you go on to Mark, good night to him, and say good morning to Kedaki if you manage to get up one morning to catch books. Give it eyes. Signing off.
Please help keep Politics 101 on social media and broadcast television. If you are in North America, please donate via Cash App or PayPal.
If you are in Guyana and the Caribbean and don't have access to Cash App and PayPal, email your pledge to dhines6106@aol.com and we will direct you how to get your donation to us. Thank you in advance for your donation.